Welcome to this week's installment of two idiots talking about how much Kabaneri sucks.
We should call that the name of it, not like just Saturday Morning Ramblings. Two idiots talking about how Carbonari sucks. Better name altogether.
Yeah,
Flows off the tongue better as well.
it's a much more honest title, really.
Yeah, it really hits the nail on the head of what we try to achieve each week here. Not just disregard the fact of each show we watch as well. That's our main goal. Just to talk shit about Carbonari.
Pretty much.
Mm.
Uh, anyways, we should probably get into it. I this week's probably gonna be kind of interesting. Like, obviously, I don't ask you ahead of time what your thoughts on stuff were because I think it's more interesting if I'm surprised too. Although we usually line up anyways, opinion wise. But
Yeah.
I think if you're the same as I am for this week, it's gonna be a bit of a reverse week. Like a little less to talk about in regards to Kabaneri and ReZero, although I assume we can get some speculation talk on ReZero when that comes up. But I
Yeah.
think most of our time this week is actually going to be spent on Hero Academia and Bungo Stray Dogs for different reasons, but there's quite a bit to say this week about them. So we
Mm.
should probably get into things. But I'm already going to mix things up because I think it's fair if we start with Bungo Stray Dogs since it
Oh.
ended. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, it's on its break. It'll come back not this coming season, but the one after. But we normally save it for last, and we're normally strained for time by then, anyways. So just to give it its fair shot, since it's over now, we should probably cover it first.
Sounds good.
So let's start with that. What did you think of this week's finale for this season of Bungo Stray Dogs, and maybe even the show as a whole, Lewis? Even though there's
Um.
still the second half to air, I should have mentioned that. Anyways,
Yeah, well, the first half of Bungou Stray Dogs was pretty darn great. I was pleasantly surprised by it. I remember starting off with it and thinking, "Wow, this show is very slow," and it kind of kept that pace of just that kind of like slow build up towards a eventual high impact scene. But um, I, I think that the overall pacing of the show was very well thought out, and it was very natural to when you go back and look at how things played out in the end. Um, Other than that, there really isn't anything to say about the plot wise, since the entire show itself is basically set up for its characters more than anything. Like the characters are what makes the show great. It's kind of the same thing with another thing that oh wait, no, I'm thinking of something completely different. Um, but yeah, like the plot itself is very uh uninspired, maybe, I guess. Like it's basically at its core, Bungo Stray Dogs is basically just one faction versus another faction with adventures in between. It's just the character developments and interactions in between the so-called the events of the plot that make the show worth watching and makes it so great. Um, as far that's just my overall brief thoughts of the show. As far as this episode goes, and what leads us on to season two, um, it's probably the best cliffhanger of the show, which, well, I guess two new characters introduced this episode, and we got to see more of blonde dude. Um,
F. Scott Fitzgerald.
yeah, sure, go with that. He said something in English this episode, but I forget what it was. Mm, yeah, whatever. Um, so we got to see more of him. Uh, he he's obviously been that little factor in the show with oh, you can buy anything with money. Um, that sort of like snobby prince sort of character, which is fun to see whenever done right. But I say the main thing, which is obviously the um, what will be the main rival, I guess, of season two, was the um. Did we get a name for him? I think we did. The guy who was chasing after Elise and who scared the heaven crap out of Mary, or the person voiced by Hanzo Akana. Uh, uh, Big dude, long hair, lab coat. You know the guy. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So with his introduction, that little like spiral into I guess fuck, what's her name? Mary.
I
Either
believe
way,
so. Yeah.
yeah, I forget anyways, but like she was kind of set up as sort of a I guess all like the rest of the villains have been set up throughout this episode, would just try to show rather, while still having that little bit extra power to her. And suddenly this guy comes in who is suddenly just like you would have assumed just been like, a passing figure. Turns out to be this all powerful, all great, strikes fear into anyone who goes past him, excluding Asushi. Uh, and they really showed him off to be a huge dominating figure that is mysterious and is powerful. That's probably the best way that they could have done it to introduce him in, and it was done in very well. Like they kind of like introduced him in a kind of a typical Bungo Stray Dog style of literally him just being, done introduced as a comedic figure and just have him be introduced funnily, that's a word, comedically, um, while still giving him like, yeah, this guy's a serious deal. He will fuck you up. Um, so yeah, so far leading into Bungo Stray Dogs 2, uh, it's gonna be if they're gonna keep this the same format as season one, it'll be interesting to do it since they just seem to have just literally just set up a uh just a I think they're really gonna like bring up the war between the port mafia and the detective agency for like as an ongoing thing. Like there isn't going to be any like filler episodes like this episode, like this series. So season two is it looks like it's gonna be one big wild ride, really.
Yeah. That seems like it's it. It seems like a lot of you kind of mentioned it before, but the season was largely set up to the stuff that's going to happen in the next season because we've gone through I think all of the agency characters at this point unless I'm forgetting someone. Um I mean some characters didn't have like episodes to themselves on like their own, like obviously the leader of the agency. We've just kind of seen him, around here and there. He never had like an episode to himself or anything. But for the most part, we know who all the agency people are. They've had their time to like be introduced and such, and that way it's out of the way for the second half of the show. Um, and it's also set everyone up. Like it did a good job of like throughout most of the season, Akutagawa was like the big bad. Like he was like that guy
Mm.
they needed to like avoid and fight, and then like they finally managed to overcome him in like a recent episode, just for them to introduce even more dangerous people. So that was like a clever little like play on it. Like it's like, well, now that Atsushi's beaten him in a fight, like sure it wasn't like a clean win, like he struggled to do it, but at the same time he still did win. So now there needs to be like a bigger threat in the in play. So bringing in the guild so that now we can get our North American English writers and we can have an easier time of recognizing them. Like F. Scott Fitzgerald is obviously Gatsby as fuck. Um, I don't know too much about Mary. I've like skimmed her wiki page to like get inspiration about her, which added a lot of context for her. I don't know about her stories, but apparently in her biography, she was alone a lot as a kid. Like she didn't really have people looking after her, so she would always make imaginary friends and such to play with. That fueled her
Ah.
creativity, and it explained a lot about the choice of power that she has. So
Mm.
there was that regard. I also, like you mentioned, I really like what they did with the leader of the port mafia. I believe his name was Mori something. Names are always hard to remember.
Yeah.
um but I like that he was kind of like bumbling around at first. You're just kind of like, who's this idiot? Like he was bumbling around a little too much at first, to the point where you started to realize he was going to become relevant to the episode at least.
Mm.
It's like it was like a slow reveal of how relevant he was. Like at first he was just kind of bubbling around like, oh, Elise, where are you? And you're like, why is this random nobody getting lines? Like maybe it's just to add atmosphere, I guess. And then it keeps doing it, and you're like, okay, this guy's gonna be relevant, isn't he? And then eventually you see the picture of the girl that he's looking for, and right then and there, you probably know who he is. Like, at least when I saw the picture, I instantly realized who he was. And I feel like the show kind of expected you to realize who he was, because even before you get into the nitty gritty of who he was, there was one scene where Atsushi tries to leave and he stops him, and he has that bit of like a bit of a fucked up smile on his face. So there's
Mm.
like, it almost like expects you to know who he is. You just kind of wonder what he's going to do, Which honestly, like, I feel like people could be upset about that. They're like, it's so obvious who it is, but I feel like the show is doing it on purpose because that way, as you're watching the scene, you're so curious about what is going to happen. Like, what is he gonna do? Like, how long is he gonna keep up the act? What is he trying to accomplish here? And as per usual with my favorite writer director combo, his reveal of like the power play at work when he was on his own was great. Like with Mary just kind of like gonna let him go, and then like the reveal of like his face being shaded, and then his eyes open and they're just like these blue beams, and he's just like,
Yeah.
want to fucking try that shit? It's like it's he's so good at like leveling, like not leveling, he's so good at portraying uh like who's in power. Like we saw this even before when Momoriano was captured, Dazai, and like even though he was captured, he flipped the power of like the position of power to himself just from the dialogue. So we've seen it happen before, but seeing it again in like a more blunt fashion was also cool, like a real like spine shivery style moment. Um but yeah, that's like the episode in general was good stuff. I wonder if we're gonna see much more of Mary. She mentioned that she would not be forgiven for making a mistake, but she did run off. It's not like she's dead right now, but
Yeah.
she could get killed after she returns. Who knows? Um, it'll be really interesting to see now that there's essentially gonna be a three-way fight going on, because it feels like that was the ultimate goal of everything. Like we got to know about the Port Mafia and the Guild are largely recent, but it immediately established the threat that the Guild is. So it's sort of like there's going to be a three-way battle going on in the second half, which is really interesting and very exciting to see. And I'm glad that the boring directing of Captain Earth is gone because I'm glad that was a one-off.
Yeah.
God, am I glad. I mean, I keep saying it. Captain Earth did have its moments. It's just like for the most part, it was like it's almost like someone else was directing, like almost like a co-director, like which I wouldn't be surprised if was actually the case. But I'm so glad the fun and style and like sense of like characters and like their positions they're in and such are like back, which is
Yeah.
something I loved so much about Star Driver. Um, but I don't think there's that much else to say. It's just basically excited for season 2. I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
we'll cover that when that season rolls around because we may as well. Um, it's yeah, it was cool. Like
It was. Yeah. Like as you said, like there's a big stark difference between like just the general overall feel of Captain Earth and this, because it's kind of funny because like um I think at the start of Bungo Stray Dogs, we were kind of like saying like will it have like the same feel of their like iconic directing style with Star Driver, since Bungo Stray Dogs isn't an original work, whereas Captain
mhm.
Earth was. It's kind of interesting to see how Bungo Stray Dogs is actually played out now, since it's actually come to an end, and it's been just a great watch really overall. Like it's been funny, it's been a great character driven show, um and like it, I don't really know much about the source material itself, so I can't really say for certain if the source material just plays to the director's interest all that much. But yeah, it turned out to be just, well, leaps and bounds better than Captain Earth, really. Like, yeah, like Captain Earth wasn't a bad show. It was just very bland. It didn't have a sort of click or some sort of, I don't know, gimmick to it that really just kept it going. It was just a plain old mecha show. Really, it was very
Yeah, it was. Captain Earth was just what's the word I'm looking for? Uninspired, maybe. Like
yeah.
it's not entirely accurate because it did have some neat ideas, but that was largely on the writing front. It was the directing front that was the real problem. It was just boring. Like it didn't feel like there was any real passion in it. It was sort of like I mentioned, I wouldn't be surprised if other directors handled most of the episodes. Um, but yeah, I don't want to go too much into Captain Earth, otherwise we'll just end up
Mm.
wasting a bunch of time on that. Was there anything else about Bungo Stray Dogs you wanted to say?
Not so much. I hope Kyoka, just a little side thing. I just hope Kyoka gets a little bit more depth to her in season 2, and I also hope Mary comes back from season 2 as well. That'd be nice.
Yeah, we saw a bit of Kyoka though. Like she's still around without Sushi, especially because they're going to be living together from now on. It just
Oh
seems
yeah, that's
like,
true.
yeah, it's just that this episode didn't seem to really need her that much. Although she did show up near
Mm,
the end when she figured out, who exactly Atsushi was talking to.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'd be surprised if she wasn't around for season 2. Whether she survives throughout season 2, we'll see, because
Oh dear,
there are
no.
people after her. So.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's Bungo Stray Dogs. We're excited
Hmm.
for the second half in I guess I should say a season since it'll be about 3 months. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, we'll see it then.
Hmm.
So now we should go back to the regular schedule and talk about Kabaneri. And
Oh.
hopefully not take forever this time because I feel like we repeat ourselves every week about the faults of Kabaneri. But what did you
Yeah.
think of this week's episode of Kabaneri, Lewis?
Uh, uh like
uh,
I don't really feel anything really. Like it was supposed to be like, that kind of transitional episode within the show at the midpoint, just like, oh, our fallen hero has fallen to absolutely nothing. He must pull some power from a greater good and strike back at the great bad guy. Like it was that cliche. Oh god, I say cliche. That like stereotypical episode within like a shonen or whatever that like comes about. That's like a turning of the tides, whatever, whatever. But like I didn't really care. Like it was just kind of like, for starters, um like the entire concept of just the drawing more power from a Kabaneri is kind of weird to me, because like this entire research is very vague. Like it's just, there isn't much to it, and this is simply because there wasn't enough information given to the viewer because of everything so far. But like the entire thing is just like, literally the entire briefcase was kind of funny to me, because it was just like, black stuff makes you more carbonary, white stuff makes you less carbonary. Like I don't really, yeah, it was just very kind of silly to me, that entire like turning of the tides that would have come about. One thing I'm grateful for is that Ikma finally cut that goddamn stupid ass hair. To the point where like it was just getting in the way nowadays. So it was very smart of him to actually get it. Ironically enough, he kept the little fringe thing so it's constantly in his eye, which is not really all that tactical when you think about it. But whatever, I'm willing to overlook that because it's anime. Now, I would now there's also another thing that kind of bothered me. This is just kind of like a little thing here and there. But Biba's father, or whatever, he the entire thing, which I kinda want to say good job Cabaneri for, but like on the terms of, well written smart things Cabaneri has done, this is probably at the top, but that isn't really any crowning achievement. Just an entire like, turning on uh humanity's low, or rather easy to give in to fear, sense within humanity, and Biwa was in control of that, and he was like the sort of mastermind that was like making everyone turn on like their neighbors and their emperor and whatever. But the thing that started off was the entire thing that, uh he grabbed the hilt of the dagger, and that's what, it was obviously pricked with some like poison or whatever that made him turn Cabaneri. Like they went through his goods and they went through Biba's like personal belongings and put it in that basket. Like I'm no knife expert, but generally if I have to grab one, I have to like grab the hilt. Surely someone in that process probably would have, kind of grabbed the hilt and, could have turned to Cabaneri, and then the entire poison would have wear it off and they would have had a pandemic on their hands, maybe. But that's just a little thing I'm willing to, like, put aside that they just grab the sheath or whatever. But we need to get something to move the plot along, so I'm willing to overlook this. Uh, but other than that, uh, I'm glad to see Kurisu back. He and IMA are probably my favorite two characters in the show that still have a little bit of credibility to them. Uh, Other than that, it was just a very it was an episode. It was an episode of Kabaneri.
Yeah, I think you summarized it very well at the very start when you said you don't feel anything. That was basically me the entire episode. Like, things were just happening and I was just staring blank faced at my screen. I was just like, I don't feel anything.
Yeah.
I don't care about anything that's happening. Because I mean, it was mentioned last week, but that ship's already sailed. Like, honestly, I doubt Kabaneri could do anything at this point to pull me in. So now I'm just like so detached from everything that's happening that like I just see the absurdity in it all. It's it's one of those things that's kind of like when you play a game or something or watch a show that has a very unique like out there style to it. Like, a lot of Shaft shows are like that, where they're just like kind of really out there in style, and it's kind of like a higher barrier of entry. But when you get in, like, you're in for the long run. Like, you're into that style. Like, you will let like the minor hiccups that come as a result of it just fall by the wayside because you're so like into like the presentation and what's going on. And it's sort of the same thing, but the opposite with Kabaneri. Like, I'm just so unengaged already at this point that everything that's happening is like, I just don't care anymore, which I feel like is summarized best by like the biggest backhanded compliment I could give, which is that this would be a good episode of Kabaneri if it wasn't such a shit show. Like, it's like, you mentioned it, but they actually did one thing in this episode that, who fucking saw that coming, was actually set up, which is everyone turning on each other and exploiting that to make people turn on each other with their fear. The first couple episodes with how like shitty they treated Ikuma and Mume, like over the top, it was actually set up. Such a foreign fucking concept for the show, but it actually did it. It's amazing. The problem is that everything else was fucking stupid. I'm going to go over them now. First of all, what the fuck is with the Kabaneri needles? Where they just like prick people and now they turn into Kabaneri? Was that a thing at all before now? At all? I don't think so.
I don't remember.
Maybe they took out a Kabaneri tooth and that's what they're using. I don't fucking know. It looked like a needle though when I paused on one of the frames. There's also, I mean, we'll get to Mume in a bit. I'm sure there's all kinds of shit that goes with that. What was with Ikuma, like, getting the fucking vials? Like, you already mentioned the white and black vials, which is fucking stupid, but what was with the black vial and, like, the guy was like, yeah, it'll make you stronger. It also won't turn you into a Nue because you're a guy, and it's like, wait, what? Why?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure why gender matters to Kabane at all, but whatever.
Apparently, though, like last episode, they did mention like something about like, oh, male Kabaneris are rare, cause
yeah, they mentioned that male Kabaneris are rare, but I just figured that like that was just coincidence. Like, it was like just a thing because dudes just happen to not be Kabaneris. Like, there wasn't like an actual thing related to it. Why are they setting up now that being a male Kabaneri is so rare? Isn't that something Mume should have said like at the beginning? Like, I don't know. But even then, like, that, the gender thing's not even the dumb part. The dumb part is like Ikuma was literally told, this will make you super strong, but it will fucking kill you. You will be like basically a candle that's going to, like, you know, burn out essentially. They are who the fuck knows how many miles away from the city, and Ikuma injects himself now? How the fuck is he gonna get back to the city in time? Like, how long is this time limit? Like, why, when he heard that there was a time limit about how it wouldn't last very long, did he think, well, the train went on for, how long were they out of it? Like, a couple hours, a couple days? Who fucking knows? And he's just like, you know, I'm gonna inject myself now, and then hopefully just reach the city in time. It's just like, what? And then I didn't even go over the beginning of the episode, where it went over Biba's father with the fucking, on the same level of fucking smiling baby, where he fucking cuts his kid and then he's like, it wasn't me, fear did it! and was like, what the fuck? What is this? It was like, it was just the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Mm,
Like, obviously, you see that scene and it's like, I know where they're going with this. It's further set up for the thing that happens in the town. But it's so fucking ham-fisted and stupid that it's just like, you couldn't come up with a better setup for this. Like, you literally just had to have him knife his own kid and then blame Fear. Like, I didn't do it, it was Fear. Fuck that guy. Like, it's, oh my god. I feel
mm,
like the best way to summarize the issues with Kabaneri is that, like, it's just the simple fact that it doesn't bother to set anything up. Like, things in this episode could have actually had impact and been pretty, like, a solid episode if anything had actually been bothered to be set up. And the
yeah.
problem with the show is that it doesn't want to do that. It's too busy going a mile a minute trying to get through all its content that whenever it wants to do something near the end, it's like, oh shit, we should probably introduce this idea like 5 minutes before they do it. It's
Mm,
just like, it's so obvious that like they're literally making this shit up as they go along. Like, it could not be more obvious.
mm.
So it's I don't know.
I,
Commentary
f-
is fucking
yeah.
whatever.
I feel like there's this, I guess, checkpoints if you want to call it. Like there are certain moments within the show which have that little bit extra bit of theatrics to them. Like for example, IMA giving like coming out on top of the train. I think this is back in episode 4 or 5. IMA coming out on top of the train, cuts her wrist, and we're like, "Oh, Ikama, fight with us!" and blood
Yeah.
spraying everywhere. Like I feel like that was like a checkpoint, and all Kabaneri does is that they like thought of all these little checkpoints. These like nice little like, oh, this is cool. We should put this in, but they didn't really bother to fill in the gaps, so to speak. Like they want like the cool, strong lady person to be lost. They want this cool group of people to turn into fear. I mean, give in to their fear. They want uprising. They want a beaten down hero character rise up, get a fucking gun for an arm. Um, like they built all these sort of like cool moments, but it feels like they're just like jotting down whatever they can do, whatever, just to like give something, just to produce something in between these moments. And those moments are practically the vast majority of the show, which kind of gives me that sort of like they're making this all up on the fly, really. Like they're not really they're really failing at getting from A to B a lot, which is sad, I guess.
It's really the same issue I have with most keyworks and most of Mario Kata's writing, which is that they focus, like, in those shows, they focus on the drama of things without bothering to, like, establish why you should give a shit about the characters. It's like the same fucking thing with Kabaneri. Like, it has all these big theatrical scenes and all these big bombastic moments to happen, but you don't give a shit about any of them because none of it's
Mm,
set up properly. It just comes off as fucking retarded because you're just like, why are these idiots doing this? As opposed to it actually being set up. It's like almost the exact same thing.
yeah. I it's kind of funny just to compare this actually one more time comparing this to Attack on Titan, but like Attack on Titan was not original. It wasn't like a original show. It had its source material, blah blah blah. I think the fact that they're not like going off that source material kind of like hinders them in itself, since I kind of like Attack on Titan's manga is not a work of art, really. It's not a masterpiece of any accolade or anything, but like it it understands that like it can make characters in the offset. It makes characters with you know little interactions here and there. They're not you know saturated. They're not like there a lot, but they sporadically come up. I feel like Tetsuraki and whatever, they don't understand that. They kind of like it's like, oh, Attack on Titan got popular because fucking action, huge action sequences. We'll also kind of translate that into our own original work and see how it goes. But so they're really concentrating on like the what made Attack on Titan really exciting with the action sequences, but not what kind of made it creditable, I guess. Um, in the sort of like downplayed character moments. So, and without those character moments, you're just kind of left. Well, the viewer, I mean, is kind of like left in this sort of, I don't know, void of just watching people on a screen moving about, going about their own little actions and mannerisms here and there, if you want to call them mannerisms, and just, you know, fail at giving across emotion, ideologies. I pronounce that word right. Um, you know, they don't feel like actual characters with motivations due to the fact that they're just the only reason why the only reason like they seem alive to us is because they're literally just going about walking. Like, for instance, I I don't understand why that girl at the start of the show of the episode was crying over Tamaki. Like, do they have anything going on between them? Like, even like a friendship? I don't understand that. Did they do anything together? Like, to be honest, I only remember them with Ikuma and Tamaki. Like, they didn't. And like, actually, as I say that, there was like a little moment at the start when she was giving out lunch, and they had like a little like ha 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 yeah sort of thing. Um, but like I don't understand why she was so desperate to like oh you can't make me move from here even with a gun to my head you can't make me move away from Tamaki. Like I just don't get it really. Like I don't get why the characters are so close to each other because there hasn't really had that sort of interactions with them. The only relationship I can like justify is Kursu and Ayame, not because I'm biased here, but by the fact that they had probably the only human, just the only like actual, I don't know how to call it, respectable and justified interaction in the show that would probably make them feel like human beings. And even then, that's stretching it thin. Like, the characters just don't feel alive to me.
Yeah, it's you pretty much hit the nail on the head. It's just like with her getting sad over his death, it's just sort of like you can get it in a general sense of like one of their own is dead, but it's like
Mm,
it doesn't have the weight or impact that it should if they actually had an actual relationship of some kind. You know, it's just like
mm,
we barely see them talk to each other. How many times have they actually talked to each other in the show? It's
twice.
like
I don't know.
how much stronger would that scene be if they actually were like we could see them being friends? Like as weird as the delivery was last episode, like at least there were some moments where Ikuma and he like actually had conversations and they seemed to enjoy each other's company. You know, it's
Mm.
I don't know. I just feel like we keep repeating the same shit with Kabaneri though. It doesn't set anything up. It goes too fast. It's blah 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 blah. I don't know. We just really say the same things. So was there anything else you wanted to say about this week's Kabaneri?
No, no, not at all.
Yeah. Rather we just move on.
Hmm.
Um. Anyways, next show is Hero Academia. So what did you think of this action-packed episode of Hero Academia, Lewis?
I really, really enjoyed it. Um, it was. This is probably the episode where All Might kind of like came into his own. Like the entire thing of oh he's not smiling, he must be really serious. It wasn't necessarily milked, but it was kind of like brought to attention a lot. But either way, like it was definitely a very um I don't want to say defining show episode, but it was a definitely uh, interesting episode, I guess, in regards to All Might, because like he was definitely a sort of how do I say this? Just a very good, like good hero with no real like um I don't want to say flaws because like his flaws obviously his All Might power has like a limit, but like on the surface he had no I guess non-perfections. I guess that's probably the best word that comes to mind. That was apparent to everyone around him. In this kind of episode, though, and the battle with yeah, the name escapes me. The big
Nomu
purple
or something, I believe.
Nomu. Yeah, that
Nomu?
was it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That battle with Nomu just kind of like really brought out those sort of like uh grunty, British, um, just almost kind of barbaric sense within him that was like, I must do what's right here, but god damn it, it's a hassle. So and that was very very interesting to see that sort of like contrast within the All Might we knew at the start of the show and now like he kind of summed it up perfectly like at the end when he knocked Nomu into the goddamn like sun in Team Rocket style. So
That's like literally what he did.
yeah, so and he just said like, oh, back in my day it would take me 3 punches, not 300. Like that sort of like line just really like made him it just kind of like made put that fight into context of like how all my it was kind of like almost a juxtaposition. You have this big ass burly fucker right in front of you, muscled to shit, knocked like the big bad evil guy into the sky, and but even in that moment, the viewer goes like, "Wow, he's weak." Like it was kind of a cool thing, really. But what else? Everything else with Deku, they kind of had that constant theme of him being that like, oh, he always does what's right. He always does that call to action whenever it demands it. Not when he's called to it, but when the situation calls it. With him running in to try and save you know All Might after he did a suplex on Nomu. Um, it also did a good job of actually making the students credible, as actual fighters and actual heroes. When they kind of went in and actually fought off Nomu and the fog misty guy and all hands guy. Uh, so that really helped them in their sort of like they're really good. They're nice characters, but they are also really strong heroes to be able to actually fight alongside this All Might. So um, they did a good job of actually make them actually feel like strong, legitimate heroes. Uh, Other than that, I'm for certain now that Naval Guy is definitely just on the bus outside.
Yeah, he probably is. Like, we
Yeah,
still haven't seen any
he's probably
trace of
there.
him. Yeah,
Yeah.
unless he's like in one of those other groups that are in like the weird town little areas, and we've only
Oh
seen like
yeah.
hints and pieces of them. Like, unless he's in one of those groups, like he really is just on the bus. Uh,
Yeah. Poor guy.
yeah, but I agree. It was a great episode. It's one of those ones where it's like this is a perfect example of how like build up and lead up is so important. Like it's a cool action episode regardless, but like because you know everything surrounding All Might and all the stakes that are in place, and the fact that All Might's been getting weaker, and the fact that All Might very well
Mm.
could have been fucking killed if the students hadn't actually stepped in. It's like there's so much more tension and like in stakes that you can like believe in and as a result get immersed into the fight. So like it's always about the details surrounding the fight than rather than the fight itself, although you can always respect the animation quality, and they did a pretty good
Mm.
job with the fight
Yeah, yeah.
in this when like All Might goes fucking berserk. um but just all the details surrounding the fight make it so much more impactful and like more immersive and such. And this was like a fucking great episode as a result. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a surprise, but it's still interesting that there's one episode left because that felt like a really good episode to end on. But at the same time, like it's obvious that they still have to deal with fucking facepalm guy and
Mm.
any possible after effects of that, and the possibility that All Might's secret may be out because he mentioned his time limit was done. Like he was already steaming, at the
Yeah.
end of that episode. So what happens next episode is anyone's guess. Um, it's I mean you already covered most of it really. Like it was a
Mhm.
great episode. Like it's a very straightforward episode, but it's also a very good one. Like, and I feel like that's
Yeah.
almost been a recurring thing with Hero Academia is like it's pretty straightforward of a show. Like there's not like an insane amount of depth to everything, but it's extremely competent at everything it does, which
Yeah.
makes it enjoyable to watch.
Yeah.
So like it's the perfect example of like the difference between it and Kabaneri, because if we keep up the whole thing of comparing everything to Kabaneri is very ambitious, but it fucking failed at everything and it falls on its face as a result. Whereas with Hero Academia, it doesn't necessarily try to do like an insane, at the same level of absurdity and heights that Kabaneri tries to reach to, but it accomplishes everything it tries to do.
Yeah.
So
it yeah,
like, it
it
makes it
does
more
the basic.
enjoyable.
Yeah, it does the basics, but it does the basics really, really well, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it does have its special moments here and there. Like Naval Laser Guy's fucking amazing. It's just that it's the difference between like I guess if you it's always the debate of like would you prefer an ambitious show or a competent show? And I feel like this is like the perfect like example between the two to be like competent show any day. I guess
Mm.
it would also I guess it would depend on like how much of a failure the I already forgot the word I used to describe it. The ambitious show.
Ambitious.
Yeah, it would depend on how big the faults of the ambitious show are, like how much it falls on its face, and then how high the highs are of it. Like there are certainly shows that have faults that I like because they have amazing highs to them, but it's like on a sheer like general level between ambitious versus competency, competency all the way. And I feel like that might be a bit of a difference between critics a critical viewpoint of a show and a general audience viewpoint of a show, because I feel like a general audience wants things to be ambitious and unique and new and stuff like that, whereas like I don't care about those sorts of things. I just want a show that's like done well, and like the more well done it is, the more how well crafted it is, the more I like it for the most part.
Mm.
So it's just one of those things, but I don't know. I guess I managed to get that little comment out as a way to talk about the episode of Hero Academia, because otherwise, like, you covered most of the stuff about the episode. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
it
it
was cool
was.
stuff.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see how next episode wraps up this season, since we found out there's going to be another. I don't think it's going to be split core though. I think there's going to be like a year before we get to another season of it. I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, I don't think the announcement was that it's split core, right? Do you know?
I didn't read much into it. I just automatically assumed that it was Split Core though. Like, I don't know. It could be an origami thing where there is a year difference though.
Oh. I think I'll check the announcement while you start talking about your thoughts on this week's episode of ReZero, even though I don't like typing things when we record these because it shows up on my recording,
Yeah.
but oh well. I think it's important to find that out. But
Mm.
was that everything you wanted to cover about Hero Academia this week?
Yeah. Yeah. That about covers it up.
All right. Then our final show, my first time being our final show, I think, is
Yeah.
ReZero. Um, what did you think of this episode of ReZero, Lewis?
It was it was a good episode of introducing characters because that's what it needed to do this episode. Uh, like the characters introduced were it was a nice little change of pace of what we usually see within some shows where it's just kind of like the conveniences come to the main character in how do I say this? It's kind of like the sort of thing which happened like in the early stages of ReZero itself. Like the characters were introduced with like Felt coming in and was like, oh look at here comes the babe that's going to be my babe, and it's like no, I'm not, sorry man, I'm out. But this episode was kind of like Subaru coming to the conveniences themselves, like his inner call to action that uh brought him to the new sort of plot hooks within those characters. Like he himself just came about the um next representative for priestess just randomly, like, and that's kind of like it's a very Subaru thing to happen is what I describe it like. His sort of like natural sort of like way of finding trouble or finding action or something like that. Like it was very I wouldn't say predictable. It wasn't predictable in the slides, but it was a definite Subaru thing to happen. The new characters themselves, I love the guy voiced by Keiji Fujiwara, the guy with the the knight helm and the fur coat, yeah, six pack just raging. The dude's just great. I love him. Um, Other than that, like yeah, it was the characters themselves were like they had their own little um I guess quirks given to them, uh just little indications of who they are and what they are. Like obviously with the exception of the priestess, who's like she's the fucking priestess. Obviously she comes from royalty, blah blah blah. But people like the driver for Felix, I forget his name. The fact that like he was like described as oh, it's surprising that like you actually talk to him rather than slicing him in half, like despite you being like the devil's sword or whatever. Like it was interesting. It was, I really liked the way they introduced the characters. Uh, Other than that, we kind of some like context was giving to Roswell's statement of I'm going to kill the dragon, and uh you know that, but now we kind of like given that like sort of I forget what it was. It was like the dragon wrote that they they need five priestesses. One must be chosen out of five to get and something something. I forget the overall context, even though I just watched it today. But whatever. Uh, uh, but yeah, like that little sort of context was given overall for Roswell's statement. Other than that, I really, really enjoyed the little interactions between Rem and Subaru today. I really, really hope their the little relationship continues this way. I'm pretty sure it will, but it was great. What else? Yeah, like it was a good episode. Like it was more slow paced than what we've recently seen, but that's a given, really, due to just the overall nature of how uh the the show is going to go by the looks of it. We didn't get the new OP or ED this episode, which is fine. Really, we're most likely going to get it next episode since that's when the new season starts. Oh well, kind of starts. Uh, but other than that, good episode. I liked it.
Yeah, I similar thoughts for the most part. It's the general thoughts on the episode seem to be lower than the last few, which is kind of to be expected since it's the
Yeah.
beginning of a new arc. That's, how it goes. Um at the same time, I feel like people are being a little too harsh on the episode from what I've seen. At least like I said, like from what I've seen, like plenty of people could probably just love the episode, but it's true that it's slower. Like this is the first of the we've only gone through two other arcs before, but this is the first arc where it doesn't establish the time loop in the first episode. Though admittedly it did take the second episode of the first arc to establish it, but it also had to establish the show itself, so a little more understandable.
Mm.
Um it's so I kind of get it, but at the same time it's like so much of this episode is just purely about like speculation and what's going to happen. Like so much in this episode is based on like giving you little details here and there and making you think about like what's going to happen, like what is going to entail in this time loop. Um that it's I guess it's kind of fair to the episode on the one hand, because even then, like that makes it so that the large positives of the episode are like about what's gonna happen in later episodes. But at the same time, the episode is meant to make you think about that. Like it's meant to fuel speculation about what's going to happen. Um, something I thought about, although it could be completely false, is that they noticed they mentioned that Felix's driver. You mentioned the whole thing about the what do they call him? Like the demon swordsman of something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they mentioned that his name, he's a Van Astria, the same as Reinhard. And then Reinhard is also serving as like the main dude for Felt, who's now a candidate now.
Mhm.
Kind of interesting what Reinhard's up to, that he'd involve himself in such a way, especially after like he had a pretty pleasant exchange with Amelia and Subaru. Even though I mean, it seems like he would know who Amelia is, so the fact that he would be like, "I'm throwing all my chips in on Felt" is like kind of interesting. Like, what's Reinhardt up to? It might not be anything sinister necessarily, but he's got some motivations going on that we don't know about yet.
Mm.
Um, and then what else was there? There was, I mean, it's kind of hard to think about because it's not like the things in the episode itself you have to think about. It's like the outside stuff of like what it could mean for other future episodes.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that Reinhardt and Felix's driver are both Van Astrias makes me wonder if all of the candidates have a Van Astria that protects them. Because we don't really know who like the swordsman dude, the helmet, knight helmet and fucking, rug fucked up clothing dude is. Like maybe he's another Van Astria. Maybe it's just a custom for the Van Astrias to guard, the each candidate, a different one. It could just be a coincidence. Like maybe it's just like his uncle or grandfather who just happens to be, Felix's driver. Um,
Mm.
but it's interesting to think about. Like that's the thing with this show, is that it always makes you wonder about what's going to happen. And we already know this time loop's kind of fucked because Subaru was kind of a dick and ignored Amelia's wishes pretty explicitly. She was just like, could you just not? I mean, it's easy to understand because of all the shit Subaru's been through. And like how he's like, I want to make sure nothing bad happens to her, because it's kind of important in context. Because if something happened to her and he didn't hear about it until it was too late for him to like if something happened to Amelia, he would probably kill himself to go back in time and prevent it.
Yeah.
But if he heard about it too late, he may be locked out time wise because of how his time loops work. Like he isn't sure. So that's why he's so determined to like be with her, especially if she's going to somewhere that could cause danger for her. So
Mm.
we get why he does it, but at the same time, like he's very explicitly ignoring Amelia's wishes. So she's not too happy with him right now.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, there's all this stuff about the episode that it's like largely stuff to think about. Like a theory I have for how this arc is going to go is like we spent a decent amount of time with fucking Yukari Tamura is voicing her. Fucking
Yeah. The princess.
yeah, the orange-haired cocky princess. And
Mm.
we didn't really get to hang out with the others at all. And I have a feeling that each loop Subaru is going to get to know a bit more about him, because that's just too fucking obvious.
Okay.
So we're probably going to learn more about them in that regard. Otherwise, like, it's interesting to see what happens. Like, I wonder if the end point for this, well, obviously the end point for any of the loops is just simply to not die, but usually Subaru has to do something as a result to prevent the death. I wonder if a certain person has to win the nomination. Like, it's
Mm.
interesting to think about. It's this episode is like, all its positives are based purely on like theories of things to come, like I said before. Like it's meant to drive your mind into thinking about what's going to happen. And I think it did an excellent job in that regard. Like
Yeah.
I'm extremely curious to know what happens next episode, because I'd be very surprised if we don't find out next episode how the time loop is, as far as like time wise, how long it is. Um, if I wouldn't be surprised if we don't know how he dies, or maybe something will happen to Super who does have to kill himself. But there's going to definitely be mystery involving around either how Subaru resets or why he has to reset, because that's just how it works. Um, but yeah, like while it's speculation for other episodes, I still think that the episode itself fueling that speculation is still a positive in and of itself.
Yeah. Uh. Yeah. You really got everything there. Like. It was a good theory crafting episode in itself, because like there wasn't really um. Well, there wasn't really much to it. A bunch of characters got introduced, but like there wasn't really anything substantial in it that kind of made that you really could take away from it. Like obviously the main positive really here is, it's setting up a new arc, and it's doing it. It laid out its arc very definitely and very assertively, that it's just like, okay, well, we're able to like kind of like guess as to where it's going to go from here, which was a very nice thing. Uh, and that, like, you pretty much nailed everything there. Like, uh, I feel like it's probably going to end up with obviously someone being elected. It's just a matter of who. It's probably either going to be Felt or a thingaboopy. Yuki's
Amelia.
more a girl. No, not Amelia. I
Oh,
don't.
orange haired. Huh?
Yeah, I feel like she was kind of given that like substantial, mainly because she was introduced first or something like that. I just feel like that's kind of like a kind of giveaway, nudge nudge, to kind of have her the extra little bit of a nudge ahead of the rest of them. I feel like Amelia is. This could just be like me being trying to keep the entire show low key and everything, but uh if Amelia gets elected, then obviously something is going to happen with Subaru, and the fact that like he's going to have to get some sort of uh power given to him, or he tries to get that power, just like as you said, stay in contact with Amelia. He can't stay away from Amelia all along, and if she becomes elected as priestess, she's not going to be around Subaru a lot. So I feel like either she doesn't get elected at all, or she does get elected, and Subaru kind of like works his way up to try and, I guess, be at her side, be it as her knight or something, or any
Yeah.
other way. So I feel like that's the direction they're going to go with Amelia, really. Yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense. It's
Mm.
yeah, pretty much what you
Yeah.
said. I was
Yeah.
gonna add something, but I forgot it. Um, it'll be interesting to the OPUD, like you mentioned, next week, assuming that it or next episode, assuming that it does play. It could do the thing it does before, where like only the OP plays or only the ED plays.
Oh
Like
yeah. Yeah.
if as much work goes into the OP, especially as last first half, then
Yeah.
it might take a bit longer. But at the very least, we might actually hear the songs in the show at some point. Like even if it didn't play the ED, we always heard it play near the end. Um,
Mm.
OP wise, it selectively used it anyways, so who really knows? I wouldn't. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get the OP next episode. We maybe get the ED or at least just hear the ED, but I wouldn't be surprised if they save the OP until after the time loop's been established,
Makes sense,
because
actually. Yeah.
they could do interesting things with the visuals as far as like what's happening in the arc if they wait for that. Because it seems kind of weird, like maybe things are gonna happen next episode that are important, and the OP would somewhat spoil that if like it's
Mm.
covered in the OP. Whereas if they wait for the time loop to be established, then they can have some fun with the visuals in the OP.
Yeah, no, like that definitely makes sense, because I forget, they definitely did the same thing at the start of the episode, because I started the show rather, because I somewhat feel like the OP actually became the regular thing in episode 3 or something like that. It definitely wasn't a feature in the first episode, and I don't know what happened in the second episode. I think they just played the ED or something like that. But um yeah, no, like the fact that, yeah, like you said, it only come about when the time was established. That makes sense, because like it feels like we're on like a continuous arc. Like this will be the entire thing with the priestesses. I feel at least will continue from here until the end of the show. So obviously everything within the OP is going to relate back to that. So having the OP completely relate around that will spoil events that will happen in the next episode, obviously. Well, subtly, anyways, mildly. Um, but it will definitely like kind of give certain aspects away that they probably don't want to give away, or at least show to the audience just yet until the time loop is established. So yeah, I feel like we're going probably gonna have to wait maybe another week for the actual OP the actual OP itself. Whether or not the OP like song is going to play over the credits, as in the like ending sequence, is a completely different matter or not. But who knows really? We probably will have to wait another week for the OP though.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much. Was that everything you wanted to mention about ReZero?
Yeah, that covers it.
Pretty much. We went a little over an hour, but it seems like we're getting better at being under an hour each week. This we're getting back to it.
Yeah, we're doing
Um,
good.
I think mainly a large part before was I needed to cut us off on the Kabaneri discussion. We were just repeating ourselves a lot. So I did that this time. But then we spent a lot of time speculating with ReZero, which I kind of saw coming because it's a new arc, a lot of things to speculate. And then Hero Academia had a cool episode and Bungou Stray Dogs ended, so, just factors at play. Um but yeah, that'll do it for this week. Any ending comments you wanted to leave with the viewers, Lewis?
Um, Zero's time dilemma comes out in like 4 days. Excited for
I know.
that.
Literally all I could think about while we were recording this. A lot of the time when I was just like trying to think of things to say and I was just kind of like stuttering a bit, I was fucking thinking about Zero Time Dilemma.
It was just in your mind constantly. Yeah, so
It's in yeah.
yeah, super excited for that. Um, it's actually kind of funny because like my laptop's well, it hasn't died, but the charger has died. So I
Oh,
have
that's
to,
unfortunate.
yeah. So I'm the new charger is going to like arrive on Monday, which is cutting it close. I don't even know if it's actually going to come at Monday or Tuesday. Either way, I might be a little behind on Zero Time Dilemma, which is going to be little worrying. I just had to share that really. That's all I wanted to say. My little worrisome stint of being slightly behind on Zero Time Dilemma by a day, maybe.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think that'll do it for this recording. So
Mhm.
I guess that's it. We'll see you guys
Yeah.
next week.
Bye. Bye. Love you.
Bye bye.